there.
Yeah. What's up, beautiful people? I'm here with my friend Butch, and this is another episode of Getting Crazy with Crazy Wheels. You guys think that I've been through a lot and done a lot of cool stuff. This guy is no different. He's just like me, been through a lot of stuff, but done some really cool things and done some really great advocacy work at the same time. So, Butch, let's start this off by introducing yourself and some things you want to tell the people about who you are and where you are now.
Hey, everybody. I'm Reverend Butch Brosman, if we want to get fancy with the honorifics. I've been the co-chair of Georgia Adapt, a disability rights organization, for the better part of the last 10 years. And lately, I've been enjoying eh, going into model making and model building.
That's awesome. So also, I've found something really interesting and cool about you. You used to be a musician, and the cool thing about it is not only were you a musician, but you played a ukulele. How did you get involved with that, and how did that shape who you are?
So I got to give big credit to my dad for formulating my musical taste. And he was definitely not one of those top 40 people. His favorite bands were Frank Zappa, Devo, and Oingo Boingo. So from the get go, I was just in love and enamored with these bands, especially with a bigger, uh, fuller band with a horn section.
Oh,
So from there, you also had some punk stuff and some early blue beat ska from the early 80s in England. So that kind of formulated a lot of my musical tastes growing up.
so yeah, so I would say you're very well diverse in music, and you've also been a musician. So how did you get involved with being a musician, or being a musician, should I say? And how hard was it to formulate a band being disabled? And how did you get people to take you serious?
Well, so basically, I started. There was like a little DIY punk scene there growing up in Panama City. So just whoever the hell just kept showing up to the shows and hanging around, you're part of the club. So that ironically led to how I ended up starting with the ukulele. We were all just hanging out after a show, and I never really played anything or had any musical training. So we were all piss drunk, and we ended up seeing vintage ukulele on eBay for like $10 or something stupid like that. And out of fun, we just put a bid on it. 2 weeks later, it shows up to my friend's house. It was a bass player, and he's like, "Dude, what the fuck? Where did this ukulele come from, man?" And somebody else in the clique of friends had to remind us of the incident of us bidding on a ukulele. So there it
That
showed up, and from there, I did my best to learn how to do things with it.
that is a pretty awesome and funny story. I've never known anybody to bid on an instrument like that drunk and then have to train themselves how to play it. So, what was Let me back up a little bit. What was childhood like for you? What was it like in a day in the life of growing up as a child for you? Like, what was your family dynamic like?
Let's see. So basically, I grew up as an only child. And I say basically because I do have a baby sister, but she's like 17 years younger than me. So basically, I grew up an only child uh, and a divorced household. So I spent most of the time with dad and then big holiday vacations with mom. Dad was in Panama City Beach, Florida. So guess where I wanted to stay most of the time? I was in Florida with my dad, and then my mom was in Atlanta at the time. So it was kind of cool getting to go from the beach to the big city as often as I did.
Okay, so you had a very, very crazy and wild childhood because you always want to be with dad. So being around dad was I would say by the way you described it, it was very fun and very, very thrilling, and didn't know what you were gonna get into when you were a dad. But with mom, it was kind of it was kind of like, okay, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna have more fun with Dad. Basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, one thing I read in the article that you had sent me, your dad was also in the military. So, what was it like when he would leave or be on deployment or in the military? How did that shape your life?
Oh man, it was basically one of the things that led up to my parents separating. Um, my dad was doing a tour in South Korea, and everything kind of fell apart when that happened. And for most of my childhood, we didn't really get that, fortunately. But after he retired from active duty, he did do a couple of tours as an independent contractor to Afghanistan.
Okay, that's cool. Um, so you had been talking about Adapt. How did you get involved with Adapt, and what was life like before you were a part of Adapt? Like, what? How were the shows? Were they crazy? Did you jump off stage? Were you one of the rowdy people, or what was that? What would that look like before you got involved with Adapt? How did you get involved with Adapt, and what did that look like to get there?
Okay. So if I'm remembering correctly, I believe I was in the psych ward at Grady Hospital. Excuse me.
Okay, and
And I was watching on the news this group of disabled activists were uh, staging a sit-in at the Senate voting chambers because the Trump administration was trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And just watching live, the police just basically physically manhandling these people and just unreasonable, excessive force being used just really lit a fire under my ass. And growing up in the punk rock scene, oh God, yeah, you didn't have a good weekend unless you got in a good brawl. So to see what was happening to these people just really, really lit that fire under my ass. And when I got out of the hospital, the first thing I did was look up if ADAT had any chapters in Georgia and who would be the closest, and just to find out to get my foot in the door who to talk to. And just so ended up, the only person to have responded was Zan Thornton. And she just so happened to live a couple miles away from me at the time. And the very next day, she was dragging me out to Senator David Perdue's office. And we were out in the courtyard waving a giant flag and screaming with other protesters. It was just surreal, bam, bam, boom, how that unfolded.
Yeah, Zan is actually how I met you, and I was looking actually for a musician, and she said that you was in a band. What was the name of your band, by the way, when you were in the punk scene and all that?
So the big band I had here was a ska punk band called the Hermits of Suburbia. And we were like the go-to local ska band for better part of 10 years. Like there wasn't a big name touring ska band that didn't come through and I opened for them, you know? Or if the Masquerade just needed a local act that's going to put asses in seats, they would call us, hey, can you guys come in tonight? You mean like in 3 hours? Yeah. You know, I have like 8 people in my band. Yeah. You really think I'm going to pull that off? It'll be swell.
That's crazy, man. So you guys were well known around Atlanta. So you guys were really making a move to get to the next level. Um, so you said that you used to go to punk shows and get beaten. You used to, from what I remember from the article, you used to take a good punch and you used to get beat up pretty good. I mean, like you used to rough house and get in the pit and stuff like that, right?
Oh, hell yeah, man.
That's
not
awesome.
not these days, but yeah, when I was younger and stupider. Oh yeah, I was all about it.
Okay, so you never let your disability hold you back in in that aspect, and what I want to make sure everybody knows, you've been disabled your whole life, right? Like you were born this way, or you had. What's the name of your disability again?
So I was diagnosed with transverse myelitis and also Guillain-Barré syndrome when I was 6 months old. So that caused a inflammation of my spinal cord that caused all sorts of havoc from back issues to partial paralysis issues and so on and so forth from the waist down.
Okay, so going back to the psych work, what was it that led you into the psych work? Like, what happened, and why were you there?
Oh God. So I have manic depressive disorder, and in my younger years, I definitely struggled with multiple suicide attempts. So it's kind of hard for me to remember what time was I doing that landed me in what hospital with this time. um, God, it might have been one of the times I tried to light myself on fire
Wow.
for some reason. That it was, and I think once I doused myself with the gasoline and it immediately burnt my eyes, I kind of had the swift slap in the face to get me out of this other mindset and what I was doing. And I called 911.
Wow. So, do you have any damage from the gasoline now, or did they catch it in time where there was no damage?
They caught me just in time.
That's awesome. I'm glad
Yeah.
they caught you. So how has adapt helped you overcome your obstacles now, and how do you keep that fire going every day to keep doing what you're doing and keep moving? How does adapt play a part in that picture? Basically, what I'm
So how does adapt help me keeping focus on achieving goals?
Yes, yes.
So basically, I like and love the work because it's about helping others who may need help and they don't realize it, or might be a situation where you've been there yourself and you know they're not quite uh, dealing with certain aspects that come with disability.
Okay. So you feel like you're at the forefront of this by joining Adept. You feel like you're really doing your part by, as you said in the article, you took an ass beating at a punk show. So, you rather get your ass beat. If you can take an ass beating at a punk show, you can also take an ass beating at a Adapt rally at Washington D.C. and things like that. If you can do it at a punk show, you can damn sure do it for the better of the people, should I say?
Yeah, and it going from one very extreme into this wholly different body of work. It's not every day someone goes from playing electric ukulele in a ska band to brainstorming Washington D.C. with an army of people in wheelchairs.
Oh, oh, so
So
you actually stormed Washington D.C. with a group of people in wheelchairs. Talk a little bit about that and what it was like. Like, what did you guys do, and what is some of the work that Adapt does? Like, what's your craziest moment with Adapt? You're like, wow, I can't believe I just did this. This is crazy, but I really got my ass beat. And I showed them what's up. What's the craziest time you can remember where you just took an ass beating for the people or did something for the people that others you wouldn't think you would do, basically?
well,
Well,
fortunately, Capitol Hill, uh, pretty respectful. So we have this repertoire of, we're here demonstrating well within our rights to do so. We're nonviolent. Uh, we're not going to harm anybody and hopefully not harm any property with that as well. So there's this level of trust between us and certain police departments that we deal with possibly on a frequent basis. There's that bit of trust of we're not going to take things over the line if you guys don't. So,
Oh yeah, just like anybody else. If we go out here and protest and we see a group of people that are able-bodied, they're not going to take anything over the line unless the police do. And I heard in the article that you also had running with the cops. You got arrested a few times, and they took you out with handcuffs. And I remember you talking about how you went to Capitol Hill and you were in a hearing. I don't remember what hearing it was, but you were in a hearing, and then your family saw you get escorted out, or your family watched you get escorted out. And all they could hear was a loud voice of you guys chanting, and you couldn't even hear the bullhorns. Basically, what you said. So, what was that like? What were you guys protesting, and what did people learn from that? Was it a madhouse? Was it crazy? Was it what was the wildest thing of that happened to you guys when y'all were doing that?
okay. So when we do the sit-ins at congressional offices, the party can go as long as it needs to go, and it can get as silly as it needs to get. There'll be like one time we just randomly occupied a congresswoman's office, and that was happening while most of our people were at these two other offices, and we had to find a way to bolster our numbers at office one, or else we would be just easy targets for the police. So I ran to the other side of the office building, telling people, move your ass down to so-and-so's office. We gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. And next thing they knew, there was an entire army of people in wheelchairs that have swamped the entire gangway of that hall where office one was. So not only did the police were trying to barricade the people who are made it in that office, but we now had the police who was trying to barricade them.
Okay, so y'all made it to the office, and the police were trying to barricade you guys into the office.
Oh yeah. And then, so we kind of had them at a standstill. There was two or three of them trying to hold down the doorway to the office, but we were causing enough commotion. Somebody in the peripheral fell out of their wheelchair and started crawling through everybody else's chairs like a snake, and started getting under the feet of the police officers so we could get more people into the office.
Wow, that's amazing. That's crazy, bro.
And next thing you knew, somebody noticed, someone did the exact same thing, somebody else did the exact same thing. We squeezed in like another 50 people in that office without the police realizing, until they looked around and went, Jesus Christ, where all these people came from.
That is crazy. So would you say the reaction of the police was like pandemonium and they didn't know what to do and they were just freaking out, or were they cussing, yelling, screaming, or were they just start locking people up? Well, paint a picture of what the scene was like after they figured out that you guys had got more people in.
Oh man, it could depend. It could go any which way, and you never know. There'll be times like the story I just told where we managed to get the one up on them. Here's another good example. There was one time we were heading back from the trail of all the places we were protesting, going back to the hotel where we would crash during the week. And on the way there would be the Health and Human Services building. So just on our way, we sent like 40 of us to swing around and get there faster before everyone else, and they caused a commotion at the main doorway. They got the police and the security in there all riled up that they are basically barricading themselves in with desk tables and whatever the hell they could find right there in the office. So we get them freaking out there at the main entrance. Next thing they know, there's another battalion that swung around to the other side and got the rear entrance blockaded. And snuck enough people into the main floor. So they got confused there. They also didn't realize we had the parking deck entrances blockaded. So some of these people tried to evacuate from inside the office into the parking deck, and we already had them cornered and they couldn't even leave there.
That's crazy. So what is, we talk about the pandemonium and all the crazy things that happen, the police running everywhere and you guys just taking them over. So because of this, what are some of the big actions that ADAPT has been able to overturn or get past? What is, because of all this, what is some of the big things that people with disabilities have been able to make their voice heard and really make change because of it?
Oh, as in what achievements in the past ADAPT did for disability rights? Yeah,
just because of all this, because we have the pandemonium. So because of all this and not backing down from police and not, putting themselves first, people with disabilities, what are some of the big changes that you guys have made because of making pandemonium like this? And what kind of things has ADAPT done to really put themselves out there to really make change and to show people with disabilities we're not backing down? Like, what kind of governmental changes have you guys been able to make or impact? I'm just trying to
ADAPT started in the 70s as what's referred to as the Gang of 19 in Denver, Colorado. There was the very first integrated accessible assisted living facility there. And some of the residents wanted to take the bus to go to a certain event, and they couldn't go use the bus because the buses weren't equipped for any lifts or anything to handle a wheelchair with. So there's absolutely no way for them to use public transportation, even though you're being a citizen and paying your taxes, and that's what your money's going to, and you're being denied that service. So they decided on a very busy weekday, they went all the way to downtown Denver at Union Station, right next to the Capitol building. And they handcuffed themselves to all the buses and completely locked down the terminal. And they stayed locked to the buses for, I want to say it was a couple of weeks. Some of those protests, they did multiple protest actions of that, handcuffing themselves to the buses at Denver Transportation. And that led to all public transit in America to have wheelchair lifts and have accommodations for people with disabilities. So without ADAPT, Americans with disabilities wouldn't have access to public transportation. Let's go with the clock forward to the early 90s. And Herbert Walker Bush is in the White House, and a bipartisan bill is struggling to go through Congress, the American with Disabilities Act. You might have heard of it. So in order for President Bush to be pushed into signing it or get his attention to sign it, ADAPT were the one that staged the Capitol crawl up the steps of the Capitol. So people in wheelchairs and whatever multiple mobility devices they had just came up to the bare steps of Capitol Hill and threw their bodies down on the steps and crawled all the way up the steps to get into the Capitol. And that was the one demonstration that got President Bush's attention, and he signed the Americans with Disabilities Act into law.
Yeah, and if you guys want to go back and look at that, I actually did an episode on that last season. So if you guys want to go back and get more information on that, there also is an episode on the podcast about that. So, what is your future? What is your future with Adapt? Like, do you have anything that you're trying to get passed, or any campaigns that you're trying to work on, or what are you looking forward to doing with Adapt now? Now that you're, getting everything settled on, you had some surgeries and things like that. What are you looking forward to getting into with Adapt in the future?
So the last couple of years with the pandemic, it kind of made protests and direct action demonstrations not really conceivable, or at the very least very unsafe. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to take part in a demonstration since the pandemic started, but we've been finding ways to still stay active. So myself and Zan Thornton, we got heavily involved with both parties and their policymakers and staff on people to solely work on disability issues. So with our help and our pressuring, we got Stacey Abrams to be the first gubernatorial campaign in the history of Georgia to have a section of staff that were solely focused on disability issues and were staffed by disabled people. So we were really proud of that, and we did a lot concerning ride shares during the elections recently. We've been having a lot of key elections here in Georgia. So we've been working a lot with companies like Lyft and Uber to facilitate free rides to the election polling spots for people with disabilities. And that's something we've been focused on, and we're looking forward to doing more coming up here in the next few months with that.
Yeah, and for the people that don't know, if you don't have a disability, transportation is one of the biggest issues that we have. Even if we want to grab an Uber or something, we can't do that because transportation usually does not run after 9 o'clock for some towns, and some places don't even have buses. So with that being said, what is ADAPT doing to get accessible transportation all the way around, just for regular Uber and things like that? I know we talked about the polling polls, but is there anything we're doing to get transportation just for people in general, if they want to go to a movie, if they want to go to the mall or anything like that?
That's very interesting. So Zan's partner recently, up until recently, was a networking director of sorts for one of the rideshare companies and trying to facilitate accessible rides more routinely with their services. So a lot of that, of what you're talking about, really hinges on most likely with helping the municipalities themselves provide the accessible ride shares. Because unfortunately, what the whole business model of Lyft and Uber is, they don't technically have their own fleet of cars or the workforce to drive them. Everybody's a quote unquote independent contractor. So trying to get the rideshare companies to see the light and also see that, yeah, there's still money to be made facilitating accessible ride shares for people with disabilities. But a lot of the times, like I was saying, might be easier to work with the county or the state on getting an accessible bus where you're at.
Okay, if ADAPT could help with that, what would that look like? Like, what do you think? What kind of campaign do you think we could build to make this happen? And what would it look like? Do you think? Just imagine. What do you think we could do? Or
Okay.
what do you think we can do to make people more aware of the issue with transportation, disabled and not non-disabled people? What do they need to know? How can they help?
What do they need to know? What they can help? How they
Yeah,
help you? Yeah, basically get in touch with any of the chapter heads or the chapter chairs, and a lot of ADAPT chapters do physical meetings on a regular basis, and do have pretty large numbers in their chapters. But as far as something with your hypothetical, uh, it'll be okay. We could roll in and you put in the call to everybody you know who would show up and want to help and do something about this in your personal life and your own community there. And then we just kind of go from on with, okay, what do we got? And who do we need to piss off? And how do we do that in the most efficient way possible with the resources we have?
yeah. So, would you being a part of a deaf organization like this, what do you think the biggest issue that faces people with disabilities, and what is ADAPT doing to change that, and what can ADAPT do to change the face of the way able bodies sees people with disabilities?
So most of the time I've been in DAPS, we strongly focused on ending the institutional bias and bolstering the Olmsted Supreme Court decision, where that says people with disabilities can get the same medical treatment and other services in their own homes, in the communities they live in, and not in a assisted living center or some kind of an old folks home, to give a dated term. So a lot of what a lot of people don't realize, a disabled person can easily be thrown into a institution like a hospital or assisted living center, and they're there to be a little sack of money because the homes are collecting on their state benefits every month. Uh, so what we've really been pushing on is people can be a lot more happier uh, living in their own homes, living in the community, and not be treated like livestock.
Yeah, and it would only take like what 46 cents from every taxpayer in Georgia to afford for someone to live in their own home, right?
Yep, I believe you're correct with those numbers.
Yeah, because I was a part of 6,000 waiting, and that's one of the things we talked about. And that's one thing that most people don't understand without disabilities, how easy it is for people with disabilities to go to an institution. And I was going to ask you, what is ADAPT doing to make sure that doesn't happen, and what kind of action are they taking?
As far as the institutional bias, for many of the years I've been around, we've been trying to write, compose, and get signed into law a new piece of legislation, like I was saying, to theoretically bolster the Olmsted Act. So this would be a new on the books law saying, if there's absolutely no need for this person to go into a home, there's no need for them to go into a home.
Okay,
And yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, I think, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to ask you, talk a little bit about Olmsted and what Olmsted is to paint a picture of what people what that is, so that people don't know can understand.
Okay, so that was a Supreme Court case that originated from where I'm from here in Georgia. And oh, Lord Almighty, I'm blanking on her name at the moment, but there was a woman who was in a institution uh, for people with disabilities, quote unquote, and she didn't want to live there anymore, and she thought she could do just as fine living on by herself in her own domicile. And all the doctors agreed to that as well, said she was capable of doing such. Same thing with the family, they said the same as such. But for whatever reason, most because of the money uh, her benefits was generating, she was still kept locked up in that home where you're basically treated like a prisoner.
Okay.
So
So
she sued to get out, and that case went all the way to the Supreme Court.
okay, and what role did Adapt play with her helping to get to the Supreme Court, if any at all?
Let's see. A lot of former members were the caseworkers that helped Leanne uh, file the case and find legal representation. There were ADAPT members. I think Mark Johnson comes to mind with doing the same things and being a advocate as part of Georgia ADAPT, helping get her legal case on a more solid basis as well. And also, I'm sorry. I just hate when I have an old man moment. Yeah. Well, that basically helps wrap it up. Adapt was there from the get-go,
Yeah.
helping with her legal case.
Okay, so as we wrap this up, where can people go to get involved with Adapt, and what's the actions they need to take so they can be a part of the organization? Because I know I've always wanted to be a part of it. Before I met you and Zan, it was very hard to get into because to me you got to know somebody. That's what I always feel like, you got to know somebody before you can really get in the clique. Is that correct, or is there a website, or how do you get involved?
There should be a website. Now the thing is, I believe there are two groups who call themselves National Adapt. So you could go to adapt.org. That's pretty much should give you everything you need there. Now, as far as having difficulty hearing back from somebody, that's also another thing you got to remember with how much we push the envelope as activists. We got to make sure that you're not a you're not a dirty rat, or you're down to hang and take things to the extreme
Yeah.
like we do.
You're down for the calls, and you can't be scared to get out there and just do it, whatever that cause takes, right?
Exactly.
That's awesome. So, is there anything you want to say to the people or talk about before we wrap it up? I do want you to tell one quick story in the article. You were talking about how you were making balloon animals at, I think, the Capitol or something, and one of the people went into the meeting, and you kind of gave him a remark, and you said something about bless your heart. Tell that story because it was kind of funny to me. But and the reason why I want you to tell that story is because it shows that people with disabilities do have a voice, and you can't be scared to use your voice and stand up for yourself. And you can do it with humor, but you can be serious at the same time.
I'm glad you brought that up as well. Up until rather recently, with set of health problems I've been having, and likewise my dad. So me and my dad were balloon twisters, balloon artists. Uh, so we'd be hired for community events, private parties, and stuff, and we made balloon animals. And I'll be damned, it was the biggest money making job I ever had so far in my life. I can't think of any other job where I could get away with charging $200 an hour, and that being justified on my end, right? Uh, So yeah, a lot of the times when you're on the front line, like with the DEP, we would be in Washington D.C. like 2 times a year, just causing all sorts of hell, whatever it is, you name it. So I would always have a separate pouch or bag or something just filled with balloons. So during a lot of the times where we're just kind of sitting around occupying a space, I just break out the balloons and start practicing my balloon animals. Sometimes to the point, like there was one time we took over an office overnight, and I just kept making balloon dogs, making balloon dogs, making balloon dogs. And then we put them all to the front of the office door. So when they opened it next thing in the morning, they were just cascaded with like fucking balloon dogs, like it was the goddamn elevator scene in The Shining. So yeah, there was one instance you were referring to. We were just sitting in a hallway, and I was just fucking around with the balloons, and I made a silly ass hat with like bouncing googly eyes, and we were occupying a pretty important meeting, and there were a lot of really important people coming in and out. And I was like, holy shit, it's Dana Bash from CNN. And I'm like, holy shit, that's Senator so-and-so. Holy shit, that's like the big name people you always see on the news from Capitol Hill. And just sitting there in that hallway, I got this stupid ass hat on my head, and one of these just greasy loan shark motherfuckers just like, oh man, I like the balloons, gotta get a picture. And I just said, hey, go fuck yourself, or something to that degree. And he fucks off. And then someone just taps me on the shoulder. It's like, you realize you just told Paul Ryan to go fuck himself? Well, I do now.
So you really did use the words "go fuck yourself." That was your exact word.
It was something to that extent. I got a mouth like a sailor, so yeah. If there's a quote of me and there's no swearing, it's probably a lie.
Because when I read your article months ago, and then I went back today and read it again just to get ready for the interview of the podcast. And my sister said, "Man, when she read it, she said I gotta meet this guy." So even after all this, we're gonna have to keep in touch. Which we keep in touch all the time. We're friends and stuff now, but we're gonna have to meet in person and grab some lunch or something one day and just let you meet my sister. Y'all just talk politics and talk about how we can make change, man. Because she's the same way. So you guys really connected on that level. And as soon as she read the article, she's like, "You got to interview this guy. I can't wait." I hadn't even told her I interviewed you yet, so she's gonna be really excited. And I think people are gonna really like to hear your stories and your voice, because you're doing a lot for the community.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. And I'm sorry, it's been like a really back and forth, I think, over the last few months with us trying to do this, right?
Yeah, it's been crazy, but hey, man, it's life. But with people like you and making the changes you are, you have the voice and you have the power and you have the want and the drive, and you're still digging. I don't care how long it takes to have someone like you on my podcast. I'll wait a year. I'll wait 2 years. I don't care, because you're the man making the changes. You're the man not giving a shit, putting yourself out there. And it's just hard to get out there and do it, but you're still doing it. So I'm very
honored. Man, I appreciate that. I do. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very honored to have you on the podcast. I'm glad that we met. Is there anything you want to say to the people as we wrap it up?
Man, never let anybody tell you otherwise. Do what the hell you want to do, and do so with reckless abandonment. At some point, law of probability says you'll make it just fine.
Yeah, keep it punk, right?
Keep it punk.
Yeah, there you go. All right, well, you guys, that was Butch, and I'm glad you guys are tuned in for this episode of Getting Crazy with Crazy Wills, and we'll see you guys soon.
Ow!